Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural Last Lecture Series at Darden. The Last Lecture Series is a 22-year-old tradition at the University of Virginia that provides forum for a distinguished faculty member to give a lecture as if it were their last time to do so on a topic of their choosing. The interesting part is we don't know what Peter is going to talk about, and we all are interested in listening to him. The lecture will last around 40 minutes, and there will be a short Q&A session after that. The speaker hardly needs any introduction, but I'm going to give it a try. He's an economist who specializes in the study of international business and trade and economic development with an emphasis on understanding and combating corruption. He is also the Chief Diversity Officer of Darden and the Senior Associate Dean for degree programs. Please join me in welcoming Peter Rodriguez.
Thank you very much, Himanshu. Good afternoon, everybody. It is a great honor to be here to kick off this inaugural Last Lecture Series at the Darden School. I know it's not new for UVA, but it certainly is new here, and it's very new for me. I'd like to start by just telling all my faculty colleagues that I'm in good health. I've not been fired. I look at the dean with some hesitation, but I think that this is not genuinely my last lecture. It's merely the title of this particular event, and I want to say that it is both a great honor and quite a daunting challenge to do this, to think about what you would say if you had one last moment on the stage or one last moment in a classroom with people. It may sound a little bit easy when you begin, but the more you contemplate that, it's quite difficult to do. And I will confess to you that the more I thought about this, the more concerned I got about my level of preparation and my choice of topics. I think, in fact, that yesterday afternoon, one of the most glorious Sunday afternoons we've had in a long time, I think that I briefly went through the 5 stages of grief in thinking about what I would talk about during my last lecture. The first stage, of course, is denial, and that was cold comfort. I said, looking at my calendar, it can't be tomorrow, can it? This must not have been the right day. No one would schedule the last lecture the day after the busiest week at the Darden School, and when you feel like you've spent every hour of the last week there, that quickly went away. Then there was a little bit of anger, I confess, a little bit of anger. Not directed solely toward Himanshu, but a little bit of anger. I remember thinking, for goodness sakes, a Jefferson Cup and a handshake, what's wrong with that? That's an honor too. That would be great, and we could go on our merry way. I think there was a bit of bargaining, and I thought, one more snow day? Why not? We've had so many this year. We'll have Taco Tuesday and Wednesday. If I could just one more snow day, that would be great. A bit of depression as I looked at all your lovely Facebook posts from yesterday when everybody was out gallivanting, having a wonderful time in a weekend. And then finally, maybe a bit too late in the evening, some acceptance, I'm comforted to say. And it's at that moment that I felt a great kinship with every student at the Darden School. It really felt as if I was out a little bit late on a Thursday night, and I was recalling it was Q4 and I had a class the next day, and I recognized that I wasn't quite prepared and hadn't really readied myself for the case. And in the moment when I felt the most panicked, I thought to myself, I'm probably going to get an SP in this class anyway, so why don't I just enjoy my life and go forward and get moving? So eventually I settled on a few things that I would say and that I thought that would comprise what I would do for my last lecture. It's difficult. I'll confess that the tack I originally took, I just shied away from at the last moment. Originally, I was really thinking about my best thinkings about the field to which I've given most of my life, which is economics, and I think a lot about it all the time. It's difficult, but as I wrote a few things down, and I hope that they're useful and that they become the topic of future lectures, I felt like I sounded a little bit like a trendy cover band for Adam Smith or Milton Friedman. And it just didn't quite feel as authentic as I thought I wanted to be, and as last lecture-y, if that's a way to foot that. It's also problematic because not long ago, a great Nobel Prize winner, Tom Sargent, summarized for the University of California, Berkeley, all his great thoughts about economics, and it took him 237 words. He won a Nobel Prize, and he did it all in 237 words. I felt a little intimidated by that, and I sort of scratched through that particular effort. And so what I thought I would finally do is settle on a topic that is a little bit kin to Darden, and something that I really think defines what I view as my lifelong pursuit. And my lifelong pursuit as an academic is really in the big questions of life. And I do that for a couple of reasons. The first one is that I think primarily that questions are more important than answers. And I know that's a little bit controversial, and maybe it sounds a little bit ivory tower, to be honest, that somehow the answers to questions don't matter, or that doing things don't matter, that just questioning does. But in fact, I think questions are the primal point for everything. Questions are where everything begins, and they're the things that you never quite finish. And so questions matter more than answers. If for no other reason, imagine it this way. Suppose you get an answer, but it's an answer to the wrong question. Well, that's both useless and a waste of time. And so the right question is extremely important. And we ask lots of big questions in life all the time. And I'm not going to tackle half of them, but I'll tackle at least one that I think is worthwhile. And some of the big questions we have are about things like, what's the meaning of life? What is love? What should I do? What will I be? Why are there Cubs fans? All sorts of things like that that you can never quite answer, but you keep pursuing all throughout your life. And one of the thoughts that I thought I would share with you was a little bit about this question of, at the beginning, what should I do next? That sort of sounds to the season, doesn't it? What should I do next with myself? And how should I conduct myself? I certainly think about that a lot. It's something that you never quite finish or get done with. And it's an imperfect answer, and you need lots of different helps from around the world and from all the smart people you know to do that. So I thought I would start with that and tell you a little bit about how I first began to think about that particular question. And to do that, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about where I got started on that. I was raised in a household that was pretty middle class and pretty normal. Religion was certainly part of my moral upbringing, and we spent a lot of time thinking about things like that. My mother's the one who got me up and took me to church all the time and made me do good things, and I still do good things thinking about my mother. I would just tell you, if there's one asset you can never amortize or depreciate, it is guilt. You will always feel bad about things you don't do that your mother tells you. There's a constant coupon throughout your life, and it's just safe and immutable forever. And my mother makes me feel guilty about things when I'm not doing the right thing. She was a Protestant, she was a Baptist, and in fact she would say she was a Southern Baptist, which if you don't know what that means, that modifier turns out to be pretty important. My father's side of the family was Roman Catholic. They were very different. And so just in everything that we did, every holiday, every family occasion, there was always some moral thought or thinking about what was right or wrong. And the great thing about combining those two particular religions is that you can feel guilty every day. You're always missing some particular service, or some saint did something that you have not recognized properly, or you've merely eaten fish on the wrong day. Anything that you do will really be a problem. And so I had a lot of good thinking about sort of right and wrong and how to conduct oneself. And I'm really grateful for that. I would say that for all the whining I did at the time, it was one of the most important things that ever happened to me, was just this consciousness of trying to do the right thing, trying to think and question myself and what was good and moral right action. But I'd have to say that that's not the event that I think really pushed me most to think about what was right and wrong. That sort of comes later when you're integrating your own thoughts about what the right thing to do is. And I can remember the most sort of innocuous event, a thing that I never would have thought would have stayed with me for as long as it did, because it was so different and different from my religious upbringing that I thought, well, that's intriguing, and I thought that it would be a good frame for this first piece of advice I thought I would give you about how to conduct yourself. I was probably about 16, 17, I can't remember exactly, and I was riding in a car with some of my cousins, and we were cruising around town, coming back from dinner, and we were doing something that people don't really do each other anymore. We were talking to one another in a car, instead of looking at phones and other things. And as we were talking, we were just sort of idle chit-chat, and we were doing some what you would call peer-to-peer gossip. We were just talking about different people, and I remember they started talking about their dentist. My cousin had married this Persian guy, wonderful fellow, terrific, and they happened to have a Persian dentist as well, and they were saying these lovely, nice things about him. Oh, he's a wonderful guy, really funny, takes great care of the kids, super person, blah, blah, blah. And then someone said, the only problem is he can't find a wife. He can't get married. And that's a great point of gossip, because no one's really listening to the noise and din in the car at that moment, but then you're like, ooh, he can't get married. This could be juicy. What is it? Is the man, is he a goblin? Is he offensive? Does he look terrible in some way? And none of that was true. They said, well, no, he's a fantastic guy and all these things, but he's Zoroastrian. And he's observant, and he wants to marry another Zoroastrian, and there just aren't too many of them. A couple of 100,000 around the world, and his mother's observant, and this is what he wants. He's time to start a family. And I remember thinking, what the hell is that? I had no idea what that was. It sort of sounded like something to do with the zodiac, or maybe that, he was a Pisces and he needed a Libra with, Cancer rising or some crazy thing like that. But they said something about it, and my Persian cousin sort of told me something, and I did something then that I never have done again, probably. I went home and I looked at the encyclopedia, because that's what you did. And you go all the way to the end of the Encyclopedia Britannica, and you pull this gray book off a shelf, and you look pretty much at the back, and I looked up Zoroastrianism. And I thought it was really interesting because I didn't know much about it, but of course it's one of the great monotheistic religions of the world, very ancient. And I read a little bit about Zoroaster and Ahura Mazda and the things that you're supposed to know, and I felt a little bit less embarrassed that I didn't know this from my sophisticated cousins from the city. And I got to the end, though, and I remember what it said was kind of pithy. It was, the moral principles of Zoroastrianism are often summarized as follows, and they were this: good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And I remember it was so pure and clean and simple. It was like a bell going off in my head. I thought, wow, I really like that. That's kind of nice and concise. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. It struck me at the time differently, but now I think that Zoroaster must have had a chief marketing officer or someone who said, that's a great set of moral principles, but can we make it shorter and a little pithy? We just want some one-syllable words, and if you could make it easy to remember, that would be great. And there are only 6 words, and they're all one syllables. In fact, some of you are already thinking there's really only 4 words, right? 3 of them are the same. So it's even, there's a design thinker involved who actually truncated it even more. And I remember thinking that's a nice sort of easy way to think about just the day-to-day activities when we're always reminding ourselves about how to act and how to act with each other and how to conduct oneself. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. I remember it. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. But the more I thought about it, it felt a little bit more like it was some relationship. And like any good social scientist, that's how I began to think about it. Maybe it is, in fact, good thoughts lead to good words, which in fact lead to good deeds, and that's the way I would really think about it. And over time, I've really come to admire that simple phrase because that is sort of how I think about conducting oneself. And if there are many lessons I've gathered, I think that's really one of them, that the primal thing you have to do to really conduct yourself well so that you can lead people well and do good things is to begin with good thoughts, to really populate your mind with good thinking, good and proper thinking, nice things, positive things, that whatever you put in there is going to come out in the things you say and in the things that you do, and that you have to begin with thinking good thoughts about everything and everyone. And that's why you seek an education like this, I would think, right? So that you can begin with, I hope, good sort of science-based reasoning for how the world works, so that you can have some good thoughts that can lead to good words and good deeds. So that you can learn the human side of life and have empathy with people all around the world so that you have good thoughts that lead to good words and that lead to good deeds. And I think that that's really wonderful. Everything begins with thoughts. I know that actions matter and deeds matter. But for me, if I had a message for you, it would be begin with those thoughts and really focus on them. The first year I was an assistant professor at another school, I had a mentor. And he was an engineer. He was a Latino engineer. I think that's how we got paired. And it was sort of interesting, but I remember going to an early meeting, and he was going to coach me up on here's how you become an associate professor and a full, and here's the stages of that. And I remember really wanting to impress him. So I took my working papers, and he was a very well-known, renowned guy. He went to Princeton after that, and he's done very, very well. And I remember talking to him about all the work I was doing. And I said things like, I'm working on this paper, and I'm working very hard, and I've done some work on this, and I mentioned another paper, and I'm working with a TA, and I'm working with this co-author around the world, and I must have said work 20 times, and hard 30 times in about 3 minutes, and eventually he just sort of looked at me, and he said, yeah, Peter, wait just a second. He said, I know you're going to work hard. You're an assistant professor, and you're probably scared to death that this isn't going to work out. You put all your life towards this moment. I know you're going to work hard, but your job is different. If you're going to focus on one thing, I want you to think hard. That's your job. That's what makes you a professor, and it's a privileged place to be. And you're going to have to work hard anyway, but you better really think hard because you need to be original, and you need to come up with something that's actually new and different and better. And that's even harder work than working hard, I would say, which is to think hard. But you ought to always think hard about things, and you ought to populate your mind with good thoughts, and so many other good things are going to flow from that if you just focus on that. I'd say the first thing you ought to think hard about, and the first thought you ought to worry about, are the thoughts that you have about yourself. I don't know if you know this, but you have a lot of conversations in your life, and if you're like me or anyone else, the person you talk to the absolute most is yourself. It's always, I bet right now, there's a voice in your head, and you've heard this voice every day of your life. It sounds just like you. It's supposed to sound just like you. If it doesn't sound just like you, or if there are many of them, we'll talk later, and Sarah Wilcox Elliott will join us. But that voice is the voice of you. And you're always talking to yourself, and usually it's a good thing. Usually it's the coaching or the chastising or your mother's guilt or someone's positive charge, but it can also not be so good. Talking to yourself in your head is what happens all the time, and it's really how you ultimately learn something. Someone like me can start things going and give it to you, but ultimately you're going to coach yourself up, and you're going to think through that. And anyone can tell you what's right or wrong, but ultimately you're going to be the one that decides that. I talk to myself all the time. I'm an introvert. I'm an INTJ. I've always come out. Any fellow travelers, by the way, INTJ. It's something that you do all the time, and sometimes I will confess, I forget not to move my lips because I'm just talking in my head. And even sometimes I forget not to speak out loud or gesticulate grandly in front of no one, which can be embarrassing. About 3 years ago, a former student who had moved back to Charlottesville came up to me in a grocery store and said, "Hey, P-Rod, it's good to see you. Guess what? I moved back into town. Great, little bit of chit-chat." Before we left, he said, "I actually saw you the other day driving down 250. We were at a stoplight, and I tried to get your attention to wave at you, but you were on a conference call or something, and you look busy." And I didn't exactly lie to that person, but I didn't tell them that I was not on a conference call. I was just caught up in the moment of talking to myself about something. I don't know. I was anxious at the end of the day or was working through how I wanted to say something because it meant a lot to me. And I was clearly just speaking out loud in front of no one at this stoplight in my own little dream world. By the way, my tip for you is if you ever catch yourself doing that, sort of gesticulate at the top as if there's some imaginary speakerphone, and people will give you the benefit of the doubt and say, they're probably speaking to someone else. They're not just crazy. They're talking, but you talk to yourself all the time. And you're going to have to tell yourself pretty good things about yourself. Not too good. You need to give yourself all the hard advice too, but say the right things about yourself. Think about having good thoughts and to coaching yourself up in that way, because it's only if you do that that you'll be able to have good thoughts about other people and good thoughts about other things and other places. You're going to meet a lot of people in your life. Some of them are going to be completely different than you. And you're going to see what's on the outside. And you're going to see what you think is on the inside before you see anything else. And if you're not disciplined in the way you think, and if you don't tell yourself to think first about who they are all the way through, you might make some mistakes you don't want to make. You never want to do that. If you start a dialogue in your head that looks like it's really negative, and you get comfortable doing that, it's going to be easier to do the next time too. And you're going to talk yourself out of a lot of possibilities you have. I think I see this in you sometimes. I would say that in 1,000 classes or whatever I've done at the Darden School, I've seen people begin to have thoughts in their head, usually at around cold call moment. And you see people and they begin to get halfway through, and suddenly the negative feelings start to overwhelm them. And for some people, you can just see the body language sort of clinch up, and they kind of turn down a little bit, and the voice gets a little bit softer, and the hesitancy grows. And it's not only that I can hear it, they can hear it in themselves. And that voice in their head says, "Oh, great, you're totally blowing it. That's terrific. Not only are you the worst person in this class, everybody else knows that you're the worst person in this class. You're blowing it, blowing it, blowing it. Now you're getting all emotional. You're starting to cry inside. For goodness sakes, move on, move on, move on. I'd do anything to leave this class right now." And, a little bit of that's okay, but you really got to watch it and stop it, because if you let that go, it'll get the better of you. And if it gets the better of you, other things that are bad are going to happen too. So start with those good thoughts. And once you have good thoughts about yourself, you can have good thoughts about other people and other places and things you'd never matter seeing. But it begins with what you think. Populate your mind with best thinking the world has, and you'll find that it gets easier and easier, just like exercise. Your mind is no other thing than that big muscle that just makes all your decisions for you. So you really ought to work it out every single day. I think that's my first message that I would give you about good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. The good deeds really matter a lot, of course. You could say that if nothing else really happens in your life, you need the good deeds. If there are no good deeds, what matters at all? There's no effect or no anything else. I think the saying is that plot is character when talking about characters in a play or something else. And it is in some ways. When you meet a new group of people, what do you start to do to them? You start to think about, you start to size them up. You start to measure and evaluate them. You don't carry your reputation to a new group of strangers. You're just another stranger. And what they begin to look at you and see is the decisions you make. Is this person on time, not on time? Are they generous, are they not generous? Did they do the work, not do they work? Were they humorous, lighthearted, negative, etc.? The sum of your actions will become who you are to those people. Your plots will become your character. But even before that, it's the thoughts that still matter more than anything else. I bet many of you at some point in your life picked up a really thick book called Don Quixote. You probably read that at some point. It's a really tough book, I find anyway. Really big, really thick. But there's an example in there that makes me think of this thought, words, deeds triangle in a different way. You see, you know the story. You know where the word Quixote comes from. He's a knight. He thinks he's a knight. He's not. Everything he really thinks is not true. He's a delusional man. He thinks he's a knight. He thinks he's actually attacking giants. He's attacking a windmill. He thinks that his squire is actually a squire, but it's this peasant servant he has who kind of half ridicules him most of the time. He thinks the princess is a princess. She's far from it. Everything he thinks is wrong. Everything. All of his deeds are sort of pointless because they don't go to any particular end. But he's still noble. His thoughts and his heart are in the right place. He's thinking the right thoughts. He's trying to do the right thing. And although that's cold comfort to someone who wants action and to save the world, that's really the beginning of all the things that you have to do. So think hard and worry hard about what you think, because it matters more than just about anything else. If there's one thing I would tell you about leaving this place, is this: don't stop thinking hard about who you are and about who other people are. It's one of the most important things you can do. Of course, it's not the only thing that matters. There are many other things that matters, and I thought about one other thing that I thought was really important to me, and about noble pursuits and doing good things. And it's about something that I think you can all relate to. So I think I'll ask you to relate to it right now. We've all been in the classroom here at the Darden School many times. And if I could ask you to do one thing, I'd ask you to think about your favorite class, the best class that you can imagine, the best one that you ever had. Maybe it's a course, and maybe that's what you're thinking about. But can you really go back and I know you've had really good ones. So can you think about the very best one? The very best one. Maybe it was the one that you totally nailed, but maybe it was probably more than that. Now, can you think about the professor who was in that class? Do you remember what they looked like, or how they stood? What their voice sounded like? Do you remember the way they gesticulated? Maybe the look in their eye? I think they had something in them at that moment. My guess is that if it's the ones that I remember, it was kind of electric and fun, and everybody was kind of intense but relaxed at the right time, and there was something really wonderful happening in that moment. That's why you liked it so much. What I like to think of in those moments is that the people who do the best at a place like this and in life are the ones that really bring out this sort of magical spirit within themselves. They're enthusiastic. They have enthusiasm. You know what that's like, right? Enthusiasm. Your best professors are probably enthusiastic about what they do. They come to work, they feel happy about it. It shines, they have that swing and that swagger, and they feel good, and you feel good too, and it sort of comes out in you at that same moment. It's infectious. It spreads around you like a virus, and it's a great, great feeling. That word enthusiasm is actually a really wonderful one. I wonder if you know the origin of the word enthusiasm. Somewhere, someone is opening up Siri and asking her to define enthusiasm. Well, it's a great story. When I was on one of my first GBEs, I went down to Mexico, and there was this great entrepreneur. And this entrepreneur was wonderful. He had been a PhD, a professor. He'd started many businesses, failed many times, and had great successes. But the thing that really shone through is this guy was just electric on stage. He was talking, and everything about him was just thrilling. He was so enthusiastic, and he actually used the word. He said it in Spanish in a better way than I can, but he said, enthusiasm really used to refer to people who were fanatics, who were kind of half crazy. It sort of means, theos is God, and in was in, and the asm was the spirit. Sort of spirit of God within me is what enthusiasm really meant. They thought that they were possessed by something else, but that's the best people to know. You've met enthusiastic people before. They just bristle and shine, and everything about them is wonderful. And you've got to have that in your life for whatever you do. Something about you has to be so good. Something that you're doing has to be so exciting that you feel a genuine enthusiasm about it. And if you don't feel enthusiastic about it, you might want to think really careful about that. I would say the following. If you leave here and you start doing something, and you get up every day and you figure out that you really can't be enthusiastic about it, do something else. You may not know that right away, but whatever it is, if you don't have enthusiasm, do something else. It's not going to work. Maybe you said, stick it out a little bit, make sure you're sure, but if it really doesn't ring true to you, if you're really just reacting to other feelings and other thoughts, do something else. Because you really won't be giving the world a gift or yourself a gift if you don't have enthusiasm about what you're doing. Have you seen Yorgos Alianis? Enthusiasm. It's a Greek word, by the way, enthusiasm. Makes sense, doesn't it? Mary Margaret, or there's 1,000 of them, right? Yael, Elena. You can think of there's so many people here that just do so many things out of enthusiasm. The other day we were walking around reunions and I passed Greg Fairchild and Mary Margaret, and I thought briefly about a time 4 years ago when we were on a Follies skit on this stage. Follies used to be a live performance, by the way. We actually got up together and we did a hip-hop dance and a rap song. And it was so embarrassing. I just can't tell you how silly and ridiculous we looked. But like all the other professors I can think of, we were just sort of happy to make fools of ourselves for you because we're really enthusiastic about this place. It's fun, it feels good, and it's exciting. And when you find that match between what you want and what you're doing, and that match is perfect and pure, it's easy. It's the most natural thing in the world. And you owe yourself that, to be enthusiastic about things. Have you ever wondered how you know when you're in love? No one? That's great. It's a very cool, fantastic. Well, I'm going to skip ahead to the end then. Of course you have. Everybody does. Maybe you're thinking that now. I was hoping that someone would at least say, oh, yes, could you help me out? Professor Rodriguez, I'd like to know if I'm in love or not. What do people tell you? How do you know when you're in love? You just know. Isn't that what everybody says? You just know. Oh, how do I know if I'm in love with this person? You'll just know. Your parents have said that. Your grandparents have said that. Oh, don't worry, sweetie. You just hang out with them long enough and you'll just know. Well, that sounds completely ridiculous. And to be honest, you start to listen to that and you think, these people are all just lying. Nobody actually just knows. I remember thinking about that before I was married, and I thought, people just hang out with each other, and eventually they look around and they say, well, this isn't bad, right? Why don't we just say we know and get married, move on? And they're too embarrassed to tell other people later, I didn't really know, I took a chance. So they tell the lie we tell each other all the time. Oh, no, you just knew, it was magical. It just sort of happened and you just know. Well, I think that's actually true. I think you do just know, actually, or you kind of just know. I can remember for me at least, I just think I stopped asking the question if I was in love or not. And I think that's sort of how you just know. I think you stop asking yourself, am I happy at this job or not? Or am I happy doing this today or not? And if you're not asking that question, it's probably a pretty good sign. And then maybe you'll get some enthusiasm, and maybe you'll feel really good about yourself and everything that you do. And if you don't have that, get it. Enthusiasm is fantastic. And I think that's the second message that I would give you, that you really ought to have enthusiasm about something. When you feel positive and great and life is all rosy and sweet, that's when you have enthusiasm and you feel really wonderful. So find that thing. I don't know what it is, but you're already committed to something probably. So figure out if that's it, and if not, do something else. You have a lot of options. You're really lucky people. I think you'll find the right thing, and I think it'll make you really happy. Of course, that's great when you can do that, and when life is good and happy and sunny and sweet and wonderful, you should have enthusiasm, or when you're in love, you should follow that. But it's not always that simple. Life can be really challenging, and sometimes life doesn't work out the way you think it will. There's a great actress whom you may know, but she's older, named Katharine Hepburn, and very famous and a very important woman in Hollywood, sort of a pioneer, a very bold woman. And I think she really led the way for women's rights and other things in a time in a place where the identity a woman could take in a film was perhaps really narrowly constrained. And towards the end of her life, I remember watching her. It was like a 60 Minutes interview. And I can't remember the reporter exactly, but they said to her, well, you've gone through so much, you've lived such a long life. Has it been really tough? And she said, I'm not going to imitate Katharine Hepburn, by the way. I thought about it, but she said, yes, it was tough, but of course life is tough. After all, it kills you. And I thought that was a great message because she was saying, well, what would you expect? Of course life is difficult and it's hard. And that's going to happen to you, by the way. And it happens to all of us, that sometimes life is tough or even unfair. In all those times I was with my mom, I remember there's a book of the Bible, it's Ecclesiastes. And if you ever want to just be sort of confused and mystified, you should probably read Ecclesiastes. Lord knows what was happening in there, I suppose. That would be the right way to put it. But it has such great phrases in there like cast your bread upon the waters. And there's this one great verse, 9:11, and it's something like this. I hope I get them all right. And I saw that under the sun, that the race is not to the swift, neither is the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor peace to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill. But time and chance happeneth to them all. And somewhere your DA professor is smiling because they always tell you that time and chance is what happens to everybody. And I think that says that, life isn't always fair. And even though you might be the most meritorious, you won't win. Or even though you're well prepared, you might be confused. Or even though you're the most skillful, you might not have the favor fall upon you. And that's just life, and get used to it. And that's the same for all of us. Time and chance happens to us all, and life can be really tough. And so you have to be a little tough too, or maybe a lot tough. And if I would begin this talk by thinking about something really Eastern, or at least Near Eastern and Zoroastrian, which is a good phrase, by the way. It took me a long time to say that cleanly. I would begin this part by saying my next piece of advice to you is to really think about toughness, or what I would call grit, which, if anything, is a very Western American word. And it's nice. It's just 4 words, 3 syllables, and they're all tough syllables, by the way. G, R, and T. Toughest syllables you've got. Grit. And when I think about grit, and I think about the ability to sort of take what life gives you and to keep coming back and to not give up and to keep your chin up, chin up, chin up, I think about the toughest person I've ever known in my life, and that is my grandmother. I remember earlier this year, we had a meeting of my colleagues, and we had this meeting at a colleague's house, and we were just sort of relaxing, making pizzas, and sort of socializing, and we played that game, I think it's 2 truths and a lie, where you say, I'm going to tell you 2 truths and 1 lie about myself, and you have to guess which one is the truth and which one is the lie. And you're supposed to think about a little zinger that you can put in there that people think, oh, I bet this is really true of them, but it's like a head fake, and you want them to choose the thing that's a lie about you. And mine was, I have no first cousins. And I knew that would win, and of course it was very good because everybody thought I had first cousins, but I really don't. And people are amazed by that, and they're like, really? I mean, not to be stereotypical, Peter, but my guess was you had a few first cousins. And I have a very big family, but my immediate family is really strong. My immediate family is really small, but my extended family is huge. I'll give you a sense of that. Both my grandparents had adopted or guardians, or assumed guardianship for children, but only one natural-born child. But my extended family is enormous. It's huge. We have family reunions every other year. We issue a directory, and at my family reunions, do you know those great rides they have at the Dogwood Festival? That's what we have. And they make money. That's how many kids we have at that extended family reunion. We have risers so that we can take a family photo. Risers like in high school. And a guy with a camera that does this. We wear different t-shirts or name badges. It's huge. And the reason isn't obviously because I have aunts or uncles or first cousins. It's because my grandmother was one of 17 children. My grandmother, my father's mother, had an extremely big family. She was sort of born middle of the pack. And they lived in central Texas, and they were ranchers. And it was a pretty tough life there in the teens and 20s and 30s. And she was just so strong. I mean, you just never met a person who had such a spinal column and a carriage and a way of looking at you and talking with sort of this pure and unfettered confidence. It was a beautiful thing to watch her whole life. She used to tell us stories about that time, and they weren't sad or anything else. She just said, this is what I did, and I accomplished it. And she sort of stood everywhere like this. You know, she had that posture you're supposed to have. And her chin was always really high, and she looked you in the eye, even though she was not very tall. She was one of 17, and of course, in a family like that, they did what any good economist would do, and they specialized, because that's what you did. That's, in fact, why you had these really big families. And so some guys in particular got jobs working outside or tending animals or raising crops or doing things like that. Many of them started ventures. It was hard work. Many of the women were specialized in other ways. There was a lot of child rearing, by the way, and I think all of them sort of specialized in that. You just sort of took a kid and passed him down and moved one forward. It must have been an amazing place. Her job was not in the kitchen, which is what she wanted. She always felt a little bit aggrieved by that. Her job was laundry. Laundry. 16 brothers and sisters, her job was laundry. You could never complain to a woman who did laundry for 16 brothers and sisters in the 1920s in Texas. It just doesn't work. They're like, what? I'm sorry, I don't understand. And she was great about that, never made any excuses about anything. There's a funny story that I think she found implements that saved time and labor shameful. I remember she had this beautiful dishwasher that was sort of never, ever used. She just looked in disgust at this device all the time. I can't believe anyone would use this. What a lazy person you would have to be to use that. And for years, until her death, which was only a couple of years ago, people would sort of stand at the kitchen sink washing dishes thinking, should we use the dishwasher? I mean, it's right there. And they would say, no, she's still going to look. If you use the dishwasher, she's not going to take it. Just a tough lady, and I thought she set such a high standard for herself and others and never asked for anything. Beautiful, giving, always worked tirelessly. I can remember always saying, could you know what, I left out a piece of the story. You know how people have a nickname for their grandmother? And they're always kind of somewhat silly, like Mama, Nana, Nini, Papa, Poppy. I mean, it's always something that's a little bit driven by the kid. My sister and I, because we were so, our nickname was Tia. Do you know what we called her? Tia? That means aunt in Spanish, of course, because everybody else did. I thought that was her name. I had no idea that I had a different relationship to this person than everybody else, but that was her name. She was so kind and so tireless, we really worried about her, but she was always the first one up and the last one to sleep. I used to go to her all the time and say, hey, listen, take a break. You know, we've got a lot of people around, a lot of adults. You don't need to do this. Rest for yourself. And her response was almost always the same. She'd always say, ay, mijo, para descansar tengo el muerto, which effectively meant, you know what, I'll sleep when I'm dead, so I'm fine. Everything's going to be okay. Let's just keep going. Life was a little bit tough on her. She had a lot of reasons to be gritty. She lost her first child, the child before my father was born, shortly after his birth. My father was born in August of 1941. My grandfather was drafted about 5 months later and left and went to Army basic training. She was sort of on her own and dealing with a large family and taking in some cousins. They just left the Depression. She had a lot of loss in her life and a lot of reasons to perhaps feel unlucky. One of the children she became a guardian for drowned at the age of 8. Both my father and another child she adopted later in life preceded her in death by 20 years. She lost her husband, and all 16 of her brothers and sisters died before she did. She lived to be around 98, and you just couldn't see it on her. I don't think we ever saw a break in her stride or in her step. She just never felt sorry about anything. She made everything herself. She thought to do everything herself and never thought she needed anyone from anybody. I swear to you, as if she were here today and I was driving down 250 and we had a flat tire, she would say, all right, stay in the car, I got this. And would have gone out to solve that problem because that's who she was. And that not making an excuse could be hard for people around her. By the way, runner-up for toughest person ever is my mother, her daughter-in-law. That's a tough job, by the way, to stand up to that, but another lecture about her later. But that was a really wonderful message she sent to everyone around her. You're not going to be that tired. You're not going to be that weak. Life's going to throw you a curveball. Just keep coming forward. Life isn't about how hard you can hit back. It's about how much of a hit you can take and still keep moving forward, and that's grit. And if you don't have it, get some. You need more of it. It's a good thing in life. You'll learn from it. You'll give it to other people. The more you have, the more the people around you have. And just like enthusiasm, that toughness that's valuable will be useful. And you need that in your life. I hope that you get that in your life. I think that was the third thing. The fourth thing I would tell you that I think is valuable in life is a little bit different, and that I would want to give you as a message today. I love stories of history. I love stories like Don Quixote that are about knights and about noble purposes and about trying for things that are bigger and higher in life and are more important, that really define us beyond what we actually achieve and succeed. And throughout history, every culture, I think, has had some story about the mad pursuit of some wild, pie-eyed dream, some idea of ultimate bliss or heaven on earth or Shangri-La or something that you could pursue with great vigor. And even when people fail in something that's noble and big and huge, we love them. What do we say about entrepreneurs? Isn't it interesting how entrepreneurs like their failures or talk about them with great pride? I think that's the way it should be. It's the right thing, because they had the courage and the grit and the enthusiasm to go out there and do it and try and risk failure. And that's what happens a lot in life. I think that's what's happened throughout history. If you think about all the major civilizations and their conquest of the world, they always imagined perfect cities on earth. They always imagined that there was some place that they could arrive in that would be some paradise, be it a beach with dripping waters and fruit falling from the trees, or as in the Americas, where people would talk about a city paved in gold or some such. We've heard about that before. If you remember, during the conquest of the Americas, there were these great discoveries of new civilizations. There was discoveries of the Incas in Peru, and they talked about Tupac Amaru, or in Mexico of Moctezuma, and these great new civilizations. And ultimately, Westerners found that these folks had great riches. They had gold, they had silver, but they always wanted more, of course. There was one great example of this legend that I'm not sure how it spread, but you can imagine how beautiful and spirited it traveled around sailors and other conquistadors and others. They said that there was this one king that was so elusive. He always got away. But he was the one who had the ultimate wealth, that the real hidden treasure somewhere a little bit higher in the mountains, somewhere a little further out in the uncharted territory. He supposedly was so rich that his whole body was covered in gold dust, and he appeared completely gold. And everyone in his court, gold from head to toe, gold earrings, gold in their nose, gold shields, gold, everything you could imagine. And of course, the Spanish called this man El Dorado, the gilded one, or the golden gilded one. But the mystery came together and they called it El Dorado. And that's where we get the name, El Dorado, this mystical city of gold somewhere in the Americas, lined with gold, gold city, the ultimate finding. Just like others, it persisted in the memory for centuries, and even people like Sir Walter Raleigh pursued it. My father died when I was 23, and I can remember that he died in a racquetball court. He played racquetball every day. I think he would have wondered if he won the point. He was a pretty competitive guy, and I really liked that about him. In the few days after that, I remember we did what you always do in that moment, and that you go to look for something to say about the person. What was it that they held close to them? What was around them? What did they choose to be the emblem of their life? And I remember going to his office. His office was not unlike mine, but he was a chemist, and so his office was much cooler. He had beakers and bottles and those little models of molecules that you put around. And a lot of it was pretty stock in trade. But we were looking for something, to create a eulogy and the other things. And I remember we found two really interesting items, two things that I think really formed the basis of, I think, who he was and the message that I think that he would have wanted to send. The first was in his front desk drawer, and it was a little laminated sheet of paper about this big. I have one just like it now. And it was a prayer card. You see these in the back of a Catholic church. You can buy them there. Sometimes you get them at a funeral. This one was the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. And it's a lovely prayer. And if you don't know it, look it up. You'll like it. It's a very good one, and it's a nice thing to remember. He'd had it for a long time. It was quite worn, and you couldn't see a lot of the letters. And so it made me feel good to think that he must have kept it around deliberately. The other thing we found that I'd known about before, but I didn't sort of connect to at the moment, was this framed photocopy of a poem, and not even a really good photocopy. I guess it more appropriately would have been a mimeograph at the time, sort of purple and sketchy, not so perfect. And it was a poem that actually somehow meant a lot more to me now than it did to me then. It was a poem by Edgar Allan Poe, not one of his more famous ones, I don't think. But it was short and it rhymed. And I think my dad would have really liked that, and I like that about it. It's easy to remember. And the poem is El Dorado. If you don't know the poem El Dorado, I'm about to tell it to you, so you'll hear it in a minute. And it's a lovely poem about exactly that. It's about this pursuit of a lost city of gold somewhere in the world. Before I recite it to you, it's easy to remember, I would just remind you that it was written in 1849. And that was Poe's, he's a Wahoo, by the way, Poe's last year of life. So I think he might have been thinking about that too. 1849 is also important for another reason, some of you already have thought about, which is the year of the California Gold Rush, 49ers. And it had already begun by the time he wrote the poem El Dorado. And when it came time to eulogize him, we thought it was the perfect message. And I thought I would share it with you. If I had a fourth thing to tell you, it would be this. The poem starts, and it is gaily bedight, a gallant knight, in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long, singing a song, in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado? It's over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow. Ride, boldly ride, the shade replied, if you seek for El Dorado. I always thought that was such a beautiful message. And in the way that you sort of impart magic to a moment like that, I thought it was meant for me. I think it was the message he meant for himself. And I'm comforted that he must have reminded him about that all the time. I think it's the message Poe wanted for himself. And it's a beautiful message you should have for you. That as much as you'll find happiness, I think, in a moment when we give you a diploma or anything else or any other achievement you really strive for, there's really just no land of milk and honey on this side of the afterlife. If there is, it's probably Charlottesville on August 28th or April 28th. And it's not there either. You're just going to have to make it up as you go. There is no destination. There's only the ride to get there. And if you're going to ride, for God's sakes, ride boldly. You of all people. You have a lot going for you. You're smart. You have a lot to have before you. You could fail 10 times and you could still win the race. So for goodness sakes, be bold. I think that's what I always tell myself because it's what my father would always tell me. And you should know that. Be bold. It's what life is about, and it will pay back to you a million times. Think about having good thoughts and having good words and doing good deeds and be enthusiastic and find the grit you need and put it all together and be bold with the next stage in your life. If I had one last thing to tell you, my God, that would be it. Be bold. It's waiting for you. If I had one other thing to tell you, I'm not watching the clock. In my head, this was going much more slowly, but I sense this time has gone quickly. I'd end with this, I suppose. Great American writer Henry James, supposedly on his deathbed, had the following to say moments before his death, and I think he was speaking to his nephew. And he said, remember that the key to the successful life is only 3 things. The first is to be kind. The second is to be kind. The third is to be kind. And I don't think kindness means just being nice to people. Heavens, no, it doesn't mean that. It's not just being nice all the time. In fact, that's the wrong thing. Sometimes it's not the time to be nice. But it is to be generous and open with everyone you meet. It is to see them for the best of what they are, to look through their armor, to see the essence of their thoughts and the beauty that's therein, and to be kind in everything you think about. And if you do that, you're going to lead a happy life, and you're going to make a difference, and you're going to be enthusiastic and bold and tough, and that's all that you need to be in this life or anything else. So start with that. Start with kindness. Don't be a pushover. I'll give you a short aside. There's a great book that many people like. It's called The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, and I hate that book. I don't like it at all. And I'm sure there's some great meaning in it. But the giving tree was a chump, let's face it. He gets completely chopped down by this kid who was a deforester, and he must have had a carbon footprint the size of Texas. Someone should have stopped him. But don't be that, but be kind and be generous. And you'll find that everybody around you, I don't know, there are many lessons in life. These are the ones I would give to you. I don't really think this is my last lecture, by the way. I sincerely hope it's not. I don't think it is. But if I had one, and if I had a moment, I'm sure I speak on behalf of every colleague I have in the room and not, that I'd want it to be here, and I'd want it to be with you, and it would probably be a last case study, not a last lecture, but that would be the way to end it. So with that, I would just say thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate it, and have a great afternoon. Thanks very much.